Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. Let's get to it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent Dummy podcast. Today, we are sitting down with Dr. Rima Bonario. Rima is a dream weaver, soul coach, and wild heart healer who draws from the culmination of 30 years of her own evolution to help women experience personal wholeness, relationship harmony, and material abundance in their lives. Rima specializes in the arena of personal sovereignty and the challenge many women face in maintaining a healthy balance between caring for others and caring for themselves. Her doctoral work in transformational psychology informs her coaching, workshops, online courses, and guided tours to historically sacred places, and supports women to shed their fears, embody their feminine power, and manifest their deepest dreams. Rima, thank you for coming on the podcast.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, so we'll start with our typical two. First one being, Rima, how do you conceptualize the term codependency?
Codependency for me is about the loss of self on a daily basis. And it's a form of, sometimes it can feel like abandoning self, but I like the term other referencing, where we spend our time referencing other people's experience of us more than we're self-referencing. And the shift we're seeking is to turn that around so we spend more time self-referencing and less time other referencing.
Right. Other referencing. Can you say more about that?
Well, this comes from the way that we've been conditioned to believe our value and worth is dependent on how others view us. And sometimes not even just how they view us, but what we can do for them. And so part of the struggle for those of us that grew up in this way is that we believe very often that our sense of safety, which is dependent on the caregivers in our world, liking us, loving us, taking care of us, relies on how well we please them. And we can develop this sort of spidey sense where we're tracking everybody's emotional well-being in the space, and we start to be driven by what we are picking up in the space, and we want everyone to be happy and safe and settled because we believe then that's how we can be happy and safe and settled. But it's a losing game. It's not something that's ever attainable. And so our sense of safety and self-worth then just becomes impossible to really anchor, because there's no way to ever, it's like playing whack-a-mole with all the stuff that's needed to be handled. There's no way to ever get it all done.
Right. And I'm curious too, if you can elaborate on, you said the loss of self on a daily basis, right? So from that, I'm hearing a constant, continuous basis.
Right. When we're deep in codependency, it really colors our lives. all the time, and it's running in the background. It's kind of like if you think about your operating system, right? Some of us are on Macs, so we run the iOS. Some, are on Microsoft, so we're using Windows. Businesses use Linux or Oracle. But we don't think about, nobody says, well, what's your operating system? Like we don't actually think about what's going on in the background. We're just paying attention to whether we can get the job done that we want to get done on our computers, on our phones, what have you. But that background application, that system that we're running on, it dictates everything, right? And how well that happens. It's sort of like the filter through which everything we experience in life. And so most of us don't know where the settings for our operating system are and how to change them. And we are just sort of stuck repeating the same things over and over again until something breaks inside of us, whether it's an emotional break or a physical break, or a mental break. And we have to find another way to exist because what we've been doing is not working.
Right. Or sustainable.
Right. It's completely unsustainable. And, I'm so excited that you're doing this work, in particular, reaching out to women in their 20s and their 30s. I'm 55 now, and this has been my life's work. But I didn't really get it until I was late in my 40s, my mid to late 40s, where I was like, I guess that's not exactly true. I started doing a lot of healing work when my first marriage broke up. I got divorced at 29.
Wow.
And it's like a really shocking experience. Was not what I expected, what was going to be my life path. And at the same time, this piece around getting this idea that I knew stuff was wrong, but I didn't understand how leaving myself out in the cold. I didn't understand this idea of moving from other referencing to self-referencing until I got much later in life. So I'm really excited to know you're sharing this with women now at your age.
Thank you. Well, speaking of your path, Rima, can you share a codependent experience from your own life with the listeners?
So I grew up in an Italian Catholic household, and part of that conditioning and environment was seeing the role of a woman as primarily in support of men and the man. And so my codependency largely focuses on intimate relationships for me as a heterosexual woman, and that my friendships were pretty okay. I didn't have too many troubles in those arenas. It was just always in my romantic relationships where I would find myself in deeply codependent territory. And for me, that just looked like my whole world was just overtaken by what the man of the day was thinking about me and my relationship to him and how he was in relationship to me. And so I got into, after a wild amount of dating in college and a lot of promiscuity, which was part of my seeking validation outside of myself, thinking, well, if I just have sex with you, you'll want to be my boyfriend. And as you can imagine, that didn't work out very well. So I did end up getting married at 26 and was divorced at 29. And that was very painful, a very, very painful experience for me. And I just had to redirect myself. And I ended up getting some 12-step support. I did check out Codependents Anonymous, but that wasn't really it for me because it was showing up in my romantic relationships. So instead, I landed in the program that worked best for me with Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, which is really all about how we lose our power in relationships. And that was the beginning, really the very beginning start of my healing journey, to get my foundation back under me, and what my therapist at the time called bring my locus of control, which was outside of me at the time, inside. And so really my work in the world today is a culmination of all of this, 3 decades of work to really grow into a sovereign being.
You said defining yourself through the man of the day, something along those lines. I'm I'm wondering if any specific, you know, the like a painful, like vivid memory that comes to mind.
Oh yeah, I've got a really good one. So
Mm,
toward the end of my marriage, I was really seeking to try to work that out very much, and had gotten into the 12-step work and was doing some therapeutic work, and I was trying to take up space, as you talk about, in my
mm,
relationship. So I had some girlfriends over for a little get together, and my husband at the time would work nights, so he wouldn't get home until sometimes it would be after, midnight or 1 in the morning. And we had been sitting out in the backyard and having some wine and food, and so the kitchen was sort of blown up, right? Because we'd prepared a big meal, and then we were just hanging out and nobody was worrying about cleaning up. And he had a really big thing about, expectations of how the house would look. And I was choosing to be in my power and not be worried about what he was going to say when he came home, because I was being present to my friends and I was being in my life and I was having my experience, and I was determined that it was going to be okay, that the house wasn't going to be clean when he got home. I would clean it eventually.
right.
And it was about like 20 minutes until he was supposed to be home, and I couldn't take it. And I had to get up, and I
Mm,
just like went into this. I got so fearful. I went into this sort of spinning, and oh my God, I have to get clean. He's going to be home. He's going to be home. And my girlfriend, the last two that were there were just like, what are you doing? It's like you're an abused person or something. Like, what, this is
mm,
okay. It's okay. Nothing bad is going to happen. I said, yes, something bad is going to happen. I have to get this.
right.
And I just I couldn't stomach the fear of
Right.
how that would land for him. And,
Mhm.
that was really, truly one of the lowest points in my life. That was when I really saw how bad it had gotten.
Right.
I couldn't leave glasses and dishes on the counter and in the sink and pans on the stove because I was
Right.
terrified.
Right. So I'm hearing like this, you weren't fully conscious of it, but this effort to cultivate the self-referencing, and you're doing all the things right. You're sitting, you're having friends over, he can come home to a dirty kitchen. I'll clean it eventually, it'll be fine. So trying to cultivate that, but it is a cultivation.
Yeah.
And so, right, history, the established patterns, those eventually, with 20 minutes remaining, those one, right? That other referencing just, it clicked in, and then there goes the protocol, right? And so, yeah, just to really emphasize, like, for you and for the listener, like, it's it's a journey. And yeah, just because we think and know and are told, yeah, it doesn't mean that we're able to do it.
It's so true. We have to recognize that this way of being didn't happen overnight, and it takes time to drain away. And it's
Mm,
so important to have high quality support in your life. If we could have solved the problem on our own, we already would have. So it's important to know that doesn't make us weak, that makes us strong. One of the ways that I talk about 4 different archetypes in my work. The healing archetype is the archetype of the queen, and we can discuss why that is in a moment.
mhm,
But prior to landing in our queen energy, most of us have tried a bunch of other things. And so the 4 that I talk about that most women try or were socialized into are the good girl, which you're very familiar with. She's the one who's sort of running around after everything, cleaning up. Um, she's sort of like the Cinderella, if you will.
mhm,
Um, then there's the princess, who is her job is just to wait. She gets stuck in a waiting pattern. So I like to think of her kind of like Rapunzel, stuck in the tower, waiting for the prince to come, waiting for somebody to come and help her and pull her out of the situation. Um, then there's the superwoman. We sometimes flip into the superwoman and we say, well, I'm just not going to need any of you. I'm not going to need anything. And I can do it all myself. And we pick up our sword and we just are in battle. Everything is a battle. Everything is a challenge to be vanquished. And rebel. Some of us choose the rebel and we just sort of say, well, we're just going to burn it all down. I'm going to take all you so-and-so's with me. And you can't make me. I won't do anything. And I love to stir it up and be a disruptor. In fact, I'm going to just make like a personality out of that, or an identity out of that. All of those fail ultimately because they don't recognize our sense of sovereignty. Each one of those archetypes are a response to what we believe other people want and need from us. So they're not sourced from within. Whereas the queen archetype, she is 100% sourced from within. And it's a completely different energy.
What does codependency look like in some of these archetypes?
Well, I talk about it from the place of not understanding your relationship to your own power. When we're in codependency, we're not in right relationship to our power. We don't understand it. We don't know how to use it. We don't know how to feel it. We don't know how to be with it. It just feels hidden from us, like we're completely detached from it. So in the princess archetype, we're disempowered in the sense that nothing can happen until somebody else makes a move. We're a pawn in other people's games. If you think about historically, princesses were married off to create political alliances and solidify power for the men who were generally the ones who got the right to rule. There have been some times where we've seen that shift, where we've had some queens, and we'll talk about that. But primarily the princess energy fits in that historical category of you are an asset that belongs to someone else who will use you in however way they choose. And all you can do is sit and wait. So there's a lot of longing energy there. So when I think about it in this mythological terms, I think of power as our dragon. And the princess is afraid of the dragon. She's afraid of her own power. She doesn't know how to utilize it. And so it's just not accessible to her. The good girl, on the other hand, is a slave to the dragon. It's like her job is to clean up the poop and to feed it and to sweep out the area and make sure it has what it needs. And so her only job is to serve everything and everyone else around her. She doesn't know how to work with the dragon in a way that's a communion. Instead, all of the power dynamics she sees around her, she subjects herself or brings herself underneath others so that she can feel safer. And it may be that we don't like it, but it's comfortable, in that way that it's familiar.
Right.
And so we do what's familiar without even realizing it.
Right.
Now, the superwoman, she battles the dragon. Like everything for her is about that victory. And so she is constantly exhausted because it's a constant fight. She gets singed and burned out, all the things that happen from trying to fight. Whereas the queen, she partners with the dragon. And she rides the dragon, and they're in a partnership where they work together, where she utilizes her power for herself, but also for the good of others from a well-resourced place. I forgot to say what the rebel does with the dragon. She takes it around and says, here, use your fire over there, use your fire over here. Just shit up, so it's a difficult experience.
Right.
But where we want to get with our power is we want to be in partnership with it so that we can utilize our power in the best possible way for ourselves and for others.
Right. Okay, so before we touch or talk about how we build that partnership, reflecting on feminine sovereignty, right? Power. Do you sense that as a consequence of living in a patriarchal society with a masculine mindset, women are thus set up to feel poorly about themselves and thus feel more dependent on others to, gain value and worth through relationships?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that there's a causation there. There's a relationship there between the patriarchy as a principle, as a model for thought and action that stresses and values doing, activity, productivity, outward motion. Just on an energetic level, it is founded on the masculine principle of action. And it devalues if it even recognizes that there's another principle, the feminine principle of beingness. And
Well,
and this is the crux of my work, because as people, all of us, men and women, we are socialized into believing there's only one way of being in the world, and that's in this masculine form. As women, we mimic masculine power patterns because that's the only thing that we see, or we shy away from that power because we don't want to be that. And what I do is focus on, I love my masculine capacities. I love my ability to, create and provide support and service to people and do things in the world. Your podcast is a beautiful example of how you've created something you have to be productive. On the other hand, we want what we produce to be grounded in our deepest sense of self. And that comes from being able to be still, to be guided, to go inward, to be connected to our soul, to our very essence. And when we're doing from this place of guidance rather than busy work, we are able to create greater balance. And we're missing the capacity right now on the planet to be deeply, truly informed by our being nature. And that's the feminine. That's the feminine capacity to understand the interrelationships that are here, the interconnectedness, the networked reality that we're living in. Quantum science is revealing this, that even though the world looks like a bunch of separate things, we're really just overlapping fields of energy influencing each other. So the feminine understands that collaboration, cooperative approaches that are guided from this internal connection to the whole, this one big thing we're part of, that creates a different kind of outcome. And so as women, we have actually physically and energetically greater access to this feminine way of being, except that we've been trained away from it.
Right.
So I really love to focus on helping women come back into themselves, into their bodies, and to understand their body's energy body, their energy, the way we run our energy, so that we are really designed to be receptive. We're designed to draw in. And when we give all of our focus on giving out, we drain ourselves. We go into emotional debt. We go into physical debt. We go into energetic debt, giving what we don't have. Then we get resentful, angry, bitter, frustrated when other people don't give it back.
Yeah.
And so the feminine way is actually to fill ourselves first and know that that is our responsibility, so that we can give from a place of luscious overflow.
Yeah, as you're talking, I don't know. I think that's been such a learning experience for me. Oh no, my internet's unstable. Can you hear me?
I can now. Yes. Yep.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry,
I got you.
buddy. Little glitch. Um, so yeah, 2020 and 2021 as, entities of starting my practice, starting the podcast. I was in some groups to help with marketing, to help build my practice, and they were all run, not all of them, but some of them were just all men, and it was go, 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 do, 24/7, hashtag no days off, hashtag hustle.
Crush
And
it. Yeah.
oh my gosh. And I had what on the outside was the best, like, I don't know, we could say summer, but especially August and September of 21, financially, physically, relationally, yeah, crushing it. And I mean, internally, I I was miserable. I couldn't necessarily consciously say that because I had so many things pointing to the opposite. But yeah, the past year I've been learning more about, a gynocentric perspective, and, empowering women through therapy and feminist theory. And yeah, I feel like it's like the pendulum is slowly swinging, but it's so hard, Rima, being codependent and hearing from, like famous coaches and speakers and celebrities to my husband and brother-in-law and, close male friends about what it means to be successful, worthy, I don't know, smart. Um, it's so hard to hear that, and again, being codependent, not do everything I can to meet those standards or expectations and thus be deemed worthy. Your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
It's actually an illness that we have. All of us
Mm.
are stuck in it, that we are defining success based on these external markers, right?
Right.
And that success is very limited. We are full spectrum beings, and that's just one tiny stop on the spectrum. You know, how many listeners you have, how much money you're making. And the idea that growth is supposed to look exponential rather than be cyclical. This is a problem that's happened in part because we're divorced from nature, which is another very feminine marker for us, where there's times where the sun is out and we have, 14 hours of sunlight or 12 hours of sunlight, depending on where we are in the world. And then there's times when we need to be huddled up and by the fire, and we have, 6, 8 hours of sunlight. We're not meant to be working as hard all year long. We're meant to have times of rest. And those cycles can happen in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. And part of what I help women learn how to do is define success on their own terms and to be well resourced, exceptionally well resourced. This is the thing about the queen. She cannot do her job running the queendom unless she is exceptionally well resourced. And she doesn't run around trying to get out there and fight. She sends her captain of the guard to take care of that. She doesn't go run off to the kitchen. She has people working in the kitchens. And so how do we create resources for ourselves, support for ourselves, so that we can do the things we want to do in the world without expending ourselves to the point of burning out, where you say we're trying to create sustainably. And there's two things we need to consider here. First of all, the male body operates different from the female body. So whichever body that you are inhabiting, it runs energy differently. The power center energetically in our body is the pelvis. So if you have male genitalia, your energy body at the moment is geared to give outward, right? That's the masculine is an outflow. If you were to reduce the principles of masculine and feminine energy down to two words, it would be out and in. So the female body is wired to draw inward. That's our power center, is by pulling in. So receiving is our superpower. And, people that are going through this is a little bit of a side eddy here, but I always like to talk about this because language is limiting. We know there are certain indigenous cultures, for example, that had 5 different genders. And what I'm talking about is not gender, right? So you can have very feminine women, or you can have more masculine women, or you can have more neutral people who feel more in the center, more feminine men and more masculine men. That their indigenous cultures recognize sort of this spectrum. And even people who are going through who are transgendered and decide to go through a physical shift, part of what they have to do is retrain their energy body to actually flow in the way that is more feminine or more masculine, depending on what their inner essence is calling for. So having said all that, I'm going to speak about it from a cisgendered place because that's my experience. For me, drawing inward was hard. I didn't know how to do that. I had been trained to give outward all the time, and that we do from the chest. So when you're pregnant and you've got a baby growing inside of you, that's very feminine. You're gestating, you've drawn in, and there's a lot of growth going on in the belly. The baby's born, and we shift almost immediately to outputting, where we bring the baby up here to the chest, and now we are feeding. And mothering is actually a very masculine act. It takes a lot of giving. Right. So if we don't know how to inhabit our power center, our pelvis, and really be embodied in this part of our body, which is the source of our power, and we aren't comfortable with drawing in energetically and receiving in, we're going to always be acting from up here. And so we lose our foundation and we can fall over at any time. It's not stable. It's not sustainable. And men go in the other direction. It actually charges them. It inspires them to get out there, to crush it, to do all the things, but it drains us. And you layer on top of that the lack of entitlement that women have felt to rest. Right. Because very often we're doing that work. In my case, I was being very entrepreneurial, had 3 different businesses I was running, and I was still taking primary care of my home in my second marriage and raising my daughter. It was way out of whack, Yeah. And women of a certain age, we were just socialized into, okay, great, we're going to get a seat at the economic table, but the house still belongs to us. So it was like doubling, like exponentially having to give out more and do more. So it makes sense that men don't always get it. Like, well, why can't you just do what we do? Like, why are you complaining? Like, come on, get over it. Just get on with it. We're just not wired to operate that way forever. We're not. We do better drawing in. And so when I work in my business now, I talk about aligning, allowing, magnetizing. And I have a lot of help. And so maybe I'm not banking as much as I would if I was doing it all myself, but gosh darn it, I'm so much happier. Wow. I'm happier. I have energy left over to be sexual with my husband. This is something we don't even understand. We lose our sex drive as women sometimes when we move all of our energy up into our chest to get stuff done. And then we show up, this is what really caused me to have to deal with this. We show up in the bedroom and, I'm in a heterosexual marriage. And so this didn't work out so well, where I had his masculine energy and my masculine energy. It was not working. It was not working. I needed to learn how to inhabit my feminine body.
Right.
And, I still get to be successful in the world and do my work in the world, but I also get to be luscious and juicy and soft and happy and joyful and powerful the way that it works best for my body.
Right. I remember when I was working in community mental health, just this outpouring of care to my patients and their families, trying to please my supervisor. I was still trying to be a dutiful daughter, sister. And it's like, oh, my fiance. And I think my girlfriends in college, we actually, I don't know how we came up with this or who said it, but we talked about how in bed we were like starfish, where we just laid down, slept like a starfish, and we didn't move. I was just starfish. That's all I have, because I have no energy, no interest. And while I'm laying here in a starfish position, I'm thinking about all the things I need to do for other people, because I define my worth through them. I'm in a patriarchal society that teaches me my worth is from doing, and I'm just totally out of alignment with myself and what I want, and self-referencing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've lived this and it's so painful. And, the masculine brain, the male brain, rather, masculine's a different thing. The male brain can switch from one thing to the next and very easily block out anything else. So it's designed for that, that as hunters, they had to be single focused. And our job, on the other hand, was to find food. And we needed to know which berries to eat and which ones not to eat. And we needed to be tracking. And so our brains are very wired in ways that are not singly focused. And we can hold multiple thoughts at the same time. And if you want to have sexual pleasure and enjoy your body, we have to move out of that very busy mind into the body. And that doesn't happen like this, the way it does for men. It takes more time. And if we are living at that frenetic pace all day long, we haven't built the muscle yet to be able to be present in our bodies, and to know that our pleasure is as important as our partner's pleasure. That's part of the, codependency piece. And so we need to ask for it to slow down. And, we're getting off into another area here, but it takes a woman's body about 45 minutes to actually really be ready for penetration. Until you've actually built that muscle a little bit. When we're younger, it's a little easier. We can get, turned on a little bit quicker. Our bodies will be more available, generally a little faster, but it's over time. And generally speaking, if you want to be multi-orgasmic, you need to give your body time to open and plump up and all the things that happen to the male body inside of 2 minutes,
Right.
So this is not something most people understand. And when we're living at this fast pace in this very masculinized way, we don't know even to take that time for ourselves. And we don't know how to communicate that. We are living inside that. So we don't even know another way of living is possible. Right. And it's a very challenging experience. And sex just becomes another to-do on the to-do list.
Right.
And when you're tired, you're just looking to take stuff off the list.
Yeah. I know, again, referencing my codependency and wanting to please not only the people in my life, but the experts. And yeah, I'd put like have sex on my weekly to-do list. And then I'd start to get anxious because I hadn't. And Esther Perel said this is healthy. And yeah, just totally robbing me of the being, yeah, while I was doing what was suggested. Or
Yeah. Well, because for women who have a feminine essence, generally speaking, our experience of sexual intimacy requires receiving. And if we're sucking at receiving, which most of us do, how are we going to have an enjoyable experience? And so then we start to define our success. Was it a successful sexual experience by the male orgasm? If he came, then it was good, right? And I'm just going to tell you, from someone down the road from you, this sinks more marriages than most of the other things that we think sink marriages, because we get out of intimate connection with each other. We're not telling ourselves the truth. We're not telling our partners the truth. And when I do teach in the energetic and tantric world, which is another piece of what I do, we talk about how they have surveys of couples there. They separate the men and the women in these experiences and ask them to rate their sexual experience, and they're assured that their partner is not going to hear their answer. So they come back in aggregate, and the men, and generally speaking, say that there's the sex with their partners are 7s, 8s, 9s. The women come back, same partners, and say, oh, it's like 1s, 2s, 3s, in terms of how nourished they feel, how satisfied they are with the encounters. And these are the same people having the same experiences. And really, in truth, most men would rather know. They just don't know what else to do. And our part in that is working on our own energy body, working on our own physical body, changing the patterns of the ways that we work and operate in the world, taking time to, if you think about what we do when we go on a date, right? We usually set aside a couple of hours to bathe. Maybe we take a bubble bath if we've really got a shower. We're working, we do our hair, we adorn ourselves. We're in a ritual that we are giving to ourselves. And that ritual, we are saying in every moment, I'm worthy of this time. And in our codependency, we might be also in some way saying, well, I hope he'll like me, right? So that can be going on at the same time too. But once we're in partnership, we're in that process of doing that. Sometimes when we get married, all that goes out the door. And we forget that we need to have time nourishing ourselves. The queen takes time to dress every morning. This is part of my personal practice now, every day, to bathe. And I bathe with these powerful essential oils, and I sit in the water and I meditate, and I just let myself be. And then I get out and I take time to dress, and I'm very intentional about how I dress, and I make that a practice, a self-love practice, adorning myself. And then I come down into my day and I make sure I take my vitamins, and and I have certain things that I had to put in place, like I'm because otherwise what I would do, again, as somebody who has these codependent tendencies to come down, the very first thing I would think of is who needs me, who's emailed me, who's texted me, who wants something from me, rather than what do I need. And now I come into my day filled up, and I get to start from a sovereign place. All right, what are my goals today? What do I want to accomplish today? What's important to me today? Where do I need to move the ball forward? And not be in that place of having all that energy sucked out.
And I am hearing that similar to how you start your day. And yes, everybody, we are starting to talk about sexuality and energetic and tantric world that Rima works on, and we'll come back to the archetypes, but just to I sense you're also hinting that we need ritual for when we are intimate, and like building that beingness in ourselves, and then we can also receive with our partners.
Absolutely. So, for those of us that have a more sensual approach to our intimate life, to our sexuality, we need the candles, we need the music, we need the soft textures. We need time looking in our partner's eyes. We need to feel romanced slightly, like, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, but just, periodically throughout the day, texting emojis, a little voice, making that connection. Once again, we're filling our tank, right? So that we don't show up. This is a disservice we do to our partners when we show up in bed so empty, right? It's that starfish thing you were talking about. We're so drained. We've got nothing. We're brittle. We're crunchy. We're not soft, not that welcoming place where we want to welcome the masculine in. And I'm going to tell you, like, at a very high level of understanding tantric arts and energetic practices, this is part of our sacred role as women, as priestesses. We receive the masculine in and we help it to pause. Because in and of itself, it's not good at that. And that's why very often at the end of the sexual experience, men are just like, and that moment for them of just that release and that emptiness and that place of stillness, it's so rare and it's deeply healing for them. And it can be magical for us when we've also figured out how to help them help us and help our bodies. We know our bodies well enough that we can be receiving so much pleasure. We're receiving their energy. We're receiving their love, that it fills us. And we get to be at the end of that experience juicy and alive and filled with enthusiasm for life. And oh yes, all is well in the world. Yes, I feel this deep sense of connection to myself, my body, my purpose in the world, my partner.
Right.
And it's not often like that if we're coming into it from a deficit.
Right. For either party. Yeah. All right. Well, Rima, we'll have to have you back on to talk about codependence in the bedroom.
Yes, let's do that.
But yeah,
I will say, I will say this. So if we look at the 7 queendoms, which is the crux of my work, I took the queen archetype and broke them into 7 different arenas, because we're complicated beings. And so we've been talking about the purview of the passionate queen. And she's the one who oversees our sexual sovereignty. And she resides in the pelvic area. She's connected to the sacral chakra, if you're familiar with the chakra system. And so this is an important part of our sovereignty, that we need to be sexually sovereign beings. So I'm glad we've been talking about it, and I'd love to come back and talk about it more in depth. It's just one of 7 areas of life, though. We need to be spiritually sovereign, mentally sovereign. We need to be emotionally sovereign, energetically sovereign, and physically sovereign. And then the expressive queen is all about our purpose, our meaning, our dharma in the world. How do we give our medicine? So sovereign in how we express ourselves. And all of these, when you look at your life, this came about because I wanted to get out of these troubles we've been talking about. And I knew I needed to do it a little at a time, because when you look at the whole enchilada, it's so overwhelming. And I began to work. First, there were 4 mental. I think I had mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical at first. And then I could see, no, wait, there's a few others. Where's my sexual sovereignty? Where's my energetic sovereignty and my dharma? My medicine. So really, in the book, we go through looking at all of these areas of our lives that are important. And we talk about what it means to be in sovereignty, but we also talk about how we can fall into shadow with each of these areas as well.
Okay, so sexual, 1 sexual, 2 spiritual, 3 emotional, 4 mental, 5 expressive, 6 energetic, dharma, 7 physical.
Yeah, I would do it in this order. I like to use the chakra system as an organizing principle. So if you think of your spiritual sovereignty, this is the divine queen. The mental sovereignty is the visionary queen. The dharmic or expressive sovereignty is the expressive queen. Emotional sovereignty is the loving queen. And you go down into the now the solar plexus. This is the empowered queen. This is about owning our energy, our energetic sovereignty. Then in the sacral is this passionate queen for sexual sovereignty. And finally, down at the root is the grounded queen for physical sovereignty.
Wow.
And each of them deal with an important understanding, what I call the royal rights, our rights as queens. So the right to know that we are spiritual beings first and foremost, physical beings second, and that this world is just one level of understanding, and there's a lot happening that's bigger than what we can see. The next one with the visionary queen is the right to see clearly, to get past illusion, to see ourselves clearly and see the world clearly. And we do that by bringing that divine perspective into our third eye, into the way we view the world. Then we bring that divine perspective into our throat, into our expression. And here's where we have the right to speak and hear truth, to share our truth with the world, to have that be received, and to also receive truth. Then we move here to the loving queen in the heart. And here is our right to love and be loved. And it starts with self-acceptance and self-love. That we can't give away what we don't have. Then we move into the solar plexus where we're talking about the empowered queen. This is the right to be a differentiated self. And for those of us dealing with codependency, this is probably one of our number one troubles, is that we don't know how to differentiate. We weren't taught or allowed or encouraged to differentiate. So that's really critical. And you bring that sense of yourself as a magnificent, sovereign, spiritual being all the way down. So you say, of course I have the right to differentiate. And then you get into your solar plexus, and here is you have the right to your needs, wants, and desires. And then finally, that bottom is you have the right to exist. You have the right to exist on the planet, to take up space. I used to think sometimes in my early years, it felt like I was taking up air from much more worthy people. And I needed to earn my air. You know, that feeling that I'm not even, like, it's not even okay for me to exist if I'm not earning it somehow. And it's a very painful place to be.
Very masculine, right? Like,
It like completely disassociates us from our being nature. You know, when we look at a baby and a baby is born, there's not one of us that says, well, you know, it better start doing something here because it's taking air up on the planet. I mean, we understand that we have to care for this beautiful being. But at some point in time, we start to think, because it can walk or it can talk, and as we grow older, depending on how conscious our parents were, expectations start to get placed upon us about what we are supposed to deliver. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that we shouldn't also care about one another. Otherwise we become narcissists. Like, taking this to the extreme goes to the other end of the spectrum where we don't care about anybody. That's not what we're talking about here. We're actually talking about being of greater service to the world. The queen is nothing without serving. She is here to serve, but she does it from this exceptionally well-resourced place. She doesn't apologize for the need to be resourced, because that's how she does her job. And so it's about this balancing between knowing we need to care for ourselves first and foremost, and caring for others from a well-resourced place.
Right. That balance, which we need with our hyper masculine upbringings. Yeah. All right, Rima. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, we really will have to have you on again to talk about codependency in bed. I had a sex therapist. She was scheduled, but she had to cancel. And so it's been a topic I've wanted to explore. And you might be that person. So thank you for bringing it up. What are you offering the listeners today?
I have a free gift that I would love for you all to enjoy. It's called Relationship Rescue. It's all about living sovereignly. And there are 4 different videos that I present in that mini course. One goes over understanding our adverse childhood experiences, which we've been talking about here, and
Yeah.
actually takes you through how to score yourself so you can learn your trauma score and your resiliency score. And
Wow.
then we move from there into a video all about conscious communication and conscious communication techniques that help us be more, create more harmony in our relationship. And then I teach the cycle of reconciliation, which is a map for helping us understand how to get reconnected when we have these very normal moments where we rupture in our relationships. There's rupture happens. It's not a problem. It's that we want to move into repair as thoroughly and quickly as we can. There's a process for doing that. And then finally, the last video, I go over the 6 blocks to receiving, which is a really important video, especially for women, but also men as well. They have a feminine energy as well. They need to become good receivers too. And so that's available. That I believe you're providing the link, but you can go to the 7queendoms.net/series, SERIES. And then you can find me on my website at rimabonario.com. There's lots of other gifts and wonderful things to look for there as well.
Very impressed, Rima.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And so I just would say for the listeners that are really feeling that they're listening and they're thinking, wow, this is really this is my issue. This is really what I need to face and conquer and be held in the process of that. I am currently in the enrollment period for my annual program. It's only open for enrollment in December and January. Sometimes in early February, there might be 1 or 2 people that I allow in, but we get started and we spend a year together in a cohort of women who are committed to really anchoring their sovereignty in these 7 areas and understanding how they can move forward in their lives in a more sovereign way where they're connected to their feminine power and they're embodied as women. So I would just offer that as well. It's a really life-changing experience, and since we happen to be in that time frame right now.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I will put links to Rima's website in the show notes, the free gift. We will have you back on again. And yeah, just such a thorough, holistic, well-rounded, impressive approach. So really, I'm really glad you came on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for the work you're doing in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everyone, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Hey girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. if you want or need a professional, please